So this video, I'm going to go over the basics of lighting. This video is geared towards churches, particularly older churches, where you have existing lighting and you want to make it more efficient or update it or make things brighter and reduce your electric bill. So why should you update your lighting? Oftentimes churches do not pay attention to their lighting unless one of two things happen. The electric bills get too high, or bad lighting becomes a safety or visibility issue. So for electric usage, the surprising fact, lighting in a church can account for up to 50 or even 60% of your usage. So changing your lighting, updating your lighting can have a big impact on your electric bill. From a safety or visibility standpoint, sanctuaries, stairs, hallways, bathrooms can all be dark spaces. I've been in some churches where you couldn't even read the bulletin because the sanctuary was that dim. As congregants get older, as people get older, we lose hearing, but we also lose vision. So people trying to navigate stairs or steps, dark hallways, or even a dark bathroom, lighting can become an issue. But unfortunately, it's one of those things that we don't really pay attention to until it's not there. So lights are out, lights are flickering or flashing. Then someone pays attention to the problem. Another aspect to this is that better lighting also has a psychological benefit. A brighter space is a happier space. There are studies that show that people's moods get elevated, they get more excited, they get more motivated to be there if the lighting is right. It can also be more welcoming to visitors and new members. Or if you're trying to rent out parts of your space, lighting is going to be a key part of getting people attracted to your spaces. So a lot of this recent activity boils down to a bill that was passed in 2007 called the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, which was passed by Congress and signed by President Bush at the time. It directed the Department of Energy to set minimum efficiency standards for lighting products. So the first wave of this rule came into effect in 2012, where it eliminated all general service, meaning everyday use, incandescent bulbs and T12 fluorescent bulbs from being manufactured, imported, or for sale. In 2020, realistically 2022, they increased the efficiency standards, which eliminated all but the efficient LED bulbs. Most compact fluorescent bulbs were even taken out from this updated regulation. The new standard is that lamps must be at least 45 lumens per watt. A total ban on the sale of incandescent and halogen bulbs in the US began August 1st of this year, 2023. So they are disappearing from the shelves quickly. In addition to that, coming up, the European Union announced a ban on the use of mercury-containing lamps by this September. The ban, I believe, begins next February in most of the EU, but they will still allow the export of these lamps. So this includes fluorescent tubes, compact fluorescent bulbs, primarily. And it also prohibits the sale of these tubes and compact fluorescent bulbs, including T5 and T8 bulbs, which are the more recent bulbs. In the United States, many states have banned the sale of high CRI fluorescent tubes starting in 2023. California is looking to ban compact fluorescent bulbs starting in 2024 and all fluorescent linear tubes in 2025. So any general duty fluorescent tubes you have in your fixtures. California, you need to start looking for alternatives. Also in the state of Vermont, a little bit more aggressive. In February 2023, there was restrictions on the sale of screw-based mercury-containing compact fluorescent bulbs, CFLs. Starting next January, the sale or distribution of 4-foot general-purpose, low-pressure linear fluorescent tubes will be prohibited. So it's coming in the next few years if you are not in California or Vermont. So it's time to start looking for LED replacements for these lights. So how do we update our lighting? So I'm going to discuss different ways you can identify your inefficient lighting and make changes yourself. Or if you can't make the changes yourself, there are state or utility programs that can do it for you and still be cheaper than doing nothing. Many of these state incentives are very good. They pay a good portion of the cost right off the top before you start. Typically, caveat here, if you're replacing an existing fixture or an existing switch, typically you will not be required to get an electrical permit, but it depends on the jurisdiction, so always check with your local town or jurisdiction beforehand. If you are adding new fixtures and new wiring, that will require a permit, but again, check first. Some churches, especially older churches, you may have a fear of discovering problems like knob and tube wiring. If the building has not been touched since 1904, you may have knob and tube wiring. You may have unsafe fixtures at this point. If you discover any of these problems, call an electrician and have them handle it for you. Do it the right way. But you don't know until you take a look. You're better off knowing than finding out the hard way when the building catches fire because of bad wiring. So make sure you know what your current state is. So what is inefficient lighting? Currently, right now, it includes incandescent bulbs. You may have some hanging around in hard to reach fixtures or high wattage fixtures, especially high wattage incandescent bulbs like 150 watts, 200, 300, or even 500 watt bulbs may still be lingering around. Also T12 fluorescent fixtures using magnetic ballasts. So these are the original 4-foot 40 watt tubes from decades past. Magnetic ballasts, you will probably realize when you turn the lights on and the lights go blink, 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 pop. That's probably a magnetic ballast in there. You may have high wattage halogen spots or floodlights on your ceilings, or lighting up your pulpits, lighting up portions of your building, or even HID fixtures, high intensity discharge, things like mercury vapor, metal halide, or high pressure sodium for a parking lot. Anything that takes about 10 to 15 minutes to come up to full brightness. These are very high wattage fixtures, and there are LED replacements for them now. Another seldom thought of opportunity is exit signs. Older exit signs were incandescent bulbs, either 25 or 40 watt bulbs, 2 of them per exit sign, or if it was in the 80s or 90s, they may have compact fluorescent bulbs in there. But your exit signs are on, by regulation, 24/7, 365. So they're using more electricity than you may realize. And then finally, outdoor lighting, parking lot lights, floodlights, building floods, floodlights on your steeple, front of the building. Those are probably HID lights. So there are LED replacements for all of these now. So if any of these photos look familiar to you, you probably have some inefficient lighting still in use in your church buildings. So hopefully I don't need to explain too much why incandescent bulbs are considered inefficient. Incandescence is the physical property where you heat something up to the point where it gives off light. So by definition, it's a very inefficient light source. It's a great heat source, but it's a poor light source. So if you have a 100 watt incandescent bulb, uses 100 watts, 90 of those watts goes into producing heat. 7.5 watts produces infrared light, so it's not visible. Only 2.5 watts produces visible, usable light of that 100, so it's 2.5% efficient. However, I still hear excuses why people don't want to change their bulbs. Incandescent bulbs are cheaper to buy, which now they're off the shelves in the United States, that's no longer an option for you. They're already paid for, or we will replace them as they burn out. However, a concept you need to grasp is the concept of total cost for that light bulb, which is the purchase price plus the electricity used to burn it. When you look at total cost instead of just purchase cost, you'll see that LEDs are much cheaper overall. So if you buy a new LED, replace the incandescent bulb, and burn it, the LED is still 1/4 to 1/3 the total cost of burning that existing incandescent light bulb. So here's a quick analysis of that. So say a 100 watt incandescent bulb, design life is 1 year, 1,200 hours. If it costs 50 cents to purchase and you're paying 10 cents per kilowatt hour in electric rates, that total cost is that 50 cents plus the electric use. So about a total of $12.50 per year per bulb. A 17 watt LED bulb, which is the current 100 watt equivalent replacement, same brightness. Design life is about 5 years, 10,000 hours. Say it costs $2 to purchase that bulb. The total lamp cost over that 1 year, we're going to compare 1 year to 1 year, is $2 plus that electric use, 1,200 hours, 17 watts, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So that total cost is $4.04 versus $12.50 for one bulb. So that's a savings of $8.46 over 1 year, 68% lower cost to burn an LED. So hopefully all of these arguments go away. So a side note, halogen bulbs are a special case. They are an incandescent bulb, a high-driven incandescent bulb in a quartz crystal tube. They burn very hot. 300 watt halogen bulb burns at around 970 degrees Fahrenheit. A 500 watt halogen bulb burns at around 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. So extremely hot. The fixtures by law must be enclosed in a steel heat barrier. Even with this heat barrier, I have been in some church attics and heard other stories where they inspected their halogen fixtures up in the ceiling and they still found charred or blackened wood around the fixtures. So it's a fire waiting to happen. The good news is they do have LED replacement bulbs up to 150 watts. They may or may not be dimmable. So if you dim your lights, you may have to look at a new dimming system. But you can buy a 150 watt equivalent LED bulb for your halogen fixtures and just put that in. For higher wattages, you may need to replace the whole fixture unless you have PAR 56 headlight bulbs. Looks like the old car headlights from the 70s and 80s. They do have LED versions of these, so that might be an option as well. But halogen bulbs are very dangerous. If you remember a certain castle that went up in flames in England in the 1990s, that fire at Windsor Castle was started by a halogen work light. So very dangerous. So some of the issues with incandescent fixtures, if you still have your old original fixtures from the 1910s, 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, a lot of churches would like to preserve that look. I know several churches which replaced all of their fixtures with fluorescents back in the 80s or 90s, and a few years later regretted it. They wanted the original look back, but they threw out the old fixtures. And they are very expensive to buy reproduction fixtures. So if you have the original fixtures, check them, clean them up, and relamp them. Maintain that original look. So look at the condition of the wiring. If the insulation is brittle or unsafe, have it rewired. There are light shops, there are electricians that can do that for you. Also look at the size of the bulb socket. Many older fixtures used high wattage bulbs over 150 watts, and they had a mogul base socket, meaning a larger socket, about 1.5 inch diameter. The good news is you can just buy an adapter at any hardware store for $2 and change that mogul to medium base adapter and put a regular bulb in there. LEDs also use less current, so that does make the circuit safer. Also, the wires are not heating up as much. You don't have the current draw, so that makes it inherently safer for the electrical circuits. You can also safely increase light level while still reducing fixture wattage with these new LED bulbs. So a 100 watt incandescent bulb, the current equivalent is a 17 watt LED, same brightness. If you want more light, You can buy a 200 watt equivalent or a 300 watt equivalent bulb, still going to burn at around 35 watts. So you're still 1/3 the wattage, but you've got 2 or 3 times the amount of light coming out of that fixture now. So very good savings. So just some quick information on light socket sizes. 99% of all fixtures in North America are medium-based fixtures. They've also been called Edison base, but it's a 1-inch socket. In metric terms, it's called an E26 base, but medium base. There's also the mogul base I just talked about, 1.5-inch socket. That is called an E39 base. Again, you can buy a socket adapter, mogul to medium base, and put in a regular size bulb into that fixture. There's also candelabra base. You may see in a chandelier, the narrower 1/2-inch base bulbs. Those are called E12. There's also something called a GU base, the photo on the right there. 2 little nubs, and you stick it in, give it a 1/4 of a twist, and it locks the bulb in place. If you don't want to continue using those bases, they do make adapters to put a regular bulb in there. If you have the fluorescent ceiling lights or can lights, they may use a PL base, meaning it's a plug-in compact fluorescent tube. You can buy adapters for that, but that's called a PL base fluorescent. Exit signs traditionally use an intermediate base bulb if it's incandescent, meaning it's about 3/4 inch. You cannot put a regular bulb into an exit sign. It has to be an exit sign bulb. There's also things called socket extenders. The older compact fluorescent bulbs had a very wide base. Sometimes we would use these, screw it in, and would give us an extra inch and bring the bulb out so it would fit into the socket. I also use these in floodlight fixtures. You want the face of the bulb to be at the face of the hood of the floodlight. So this may bring it out another inch if you can't adjust it otherwise. Now, a lot of these new fixtures are what are called integrated LED fixtures, especially for homes, meaning you don't need to buy bulbs for the fixture. It has an LED array on a tape or circuit board inside the fixture. Any commercial fixture you buy, like a ceiling troffer, ceiling strip, those will be integrated fixtures. The advantage is you don't have to purchase bulbs. However, keep in mind there are some disadvantages to these fixtures. If that array fails in the fixture, you have to replace the entire fixture. Typically, they're not as bright as the old fixture, around 1,000 lumens or about a 60 watt incandescent equivalent. In my opinion, my recommendation, I would use a regular socketed fixture. It's more flexible. If the bulb fails, you just replace the bulb. And you can put whatever brightness or whatever color bulb you want in that fixture. I will guarantee 10 years, 20 years from now, we will still have socket fixtures because they are everywhere. So let's talk about fluorescent fixtures. Fluorescent tubes. Before 1990, most fluorescent fixtures used T12 tubes and magnetic ballasts. However, the manufacture of T12 tubes stopped July 2012. The manufacture of the magnetic ballasts also stopped November 2014. So a T12 tube is 1.5 inch diameter. The 4-foot tube was 40 watts. 8-foot tubes were 60, 75, or 96 watts. Or if it was an outdoor bulb, 110 watts. A single T12 tube contains 20 to 50 milligrams of mercury. So these days, in a lot of states, they're considered hazardous waste. This is why one of the big reasons they were eliminated from the market. Too much mercury. Fluorescent tubes in general, if you look at your tubes and the ends are black, that means they're at the end of their functional life. Fluorescent lights are very susceptible to what's called lumen depreciation, meaning they get dimmer over time. Newer tubes since the 1990s are T8, which is 1 inch diameter, A 4-foot tube was traditionally 32 watts. T8s are designed for electronic ballasts, not magnetic ballasts. So do not put T8 tubes in a magnetic ballasted fixture that had T12 tubes before. It overdrives the tube, and I've personally seen people do that. I pull the tubes out, and sometimes the ends are melted, or sometimes there's a hole in the glass because it gets so hot. So do not put T8 tubes in a T12 fixture. These are some lumen depreciation curves I found. There's a photo on the right there of the blackened ends of the fluorescent tube, and below that is a mercury vapor lamp past its functional life, so it turns green or blue, not throwing off a lot of light. These curves, if you look at the orange curve, which is fluorescent or compact fluorescent bulbs, the 70% level is the red line. In the lighting industry, once you get below 70% of your initial brightness, that's considered obsolete and the lamp is replaced. So the orange line crosses the 70% line after 20,000 hours, which is about 10 years of use. LEDs are the green line. They last a lot longer. Other light sources, incandescent is the purple line, and you can see it's barely reaching 1,000 hours. Its design life is 1,200 hours or 1 year. But fluorescent, very susceptible to this lumen depreciation. So we need to pay attention to that. Okay, magnetic ballasts have their own issues. The telltale sign of a magnetic ballast is when you turn the lights on cold in the morning, the lights may go blink, 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 pop. They may make a noise, tink, 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 bink, or something like that. They may flicker, they may strobe, they may flash, but they do have issues. Magnetic ballast uses additional wattage just for themselves. So if you have two 40 watt tubes in a fixture, that's 80 watts, add another 10 to 15 to 20%, typically it's around 15% of the wattage just for itself. So you're up around 100 watts for a 2-tube T12 fixture. Even if you take the tubes out, that ballast is still using that wattage, that 15% of the wattage. So it needs to be disconnected completely. Also, a magnetic ballast can only light up 2 tubes. So a 4-tube fixture has 2 ballasts in it. If you remove one bulb, the other tube on that ballast will also go out. These ballasts do get warm and leak oil. So prior to 1987, the insulating material inside this ballast and a capacitor inside this ballast for power factor correction both contained polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs. This is a suspected human carcinogen. So after 1987, PCBs were banned from magnetic ballasts. So also, the ballast labels had to be marked no PCBs. So if you check your ballasts and you do not see the words no PCBs on the label, or if the label has dried up and fallen off, you have to assume it's hazardous waste and call the authorities to remove that. Electronic ballasts are the newer ones since about 1990. They're lighter, they're cooler, they use a lot less electricity, they're instant on, and one ballast can light up to 4 tubes. So you spec out the ballast, you look at the label, does it have 1, 2, 3, or 4 tubes on it? And you pick the right ballast for your fixture. If it's a 4-tube fixture, you will buy a ballast that does 4 tubes. You can also remove tubes and the rest will stay lit. There are, in some stores for sale, 2 different types of ballast, commercial grade and residential grade. If you're relamping a church or a commercial building, make sure you see the label that says commercial grade ballast. Do not put residential grade in a commercial building. There may be an insurance problem if there is an incident like a fire. Now you can check to see if you have magnetic ballasts pretty easily now. They used to have all sorts of devices to do this, but you can use your cell phone camera. You turn it on, point the camera at the light fixture, and if it's a magnetic ballast, it will pick up the 60 Hertz flicker, and you will see yellow lines floating across your camera screen. So if you see that, that is a magnetic ballast fixture. If it's an electronic ballast, you won't see any lines. So that's a very quick, easy way to tell. So if you are going to reballast your existing fixtures, you can technically replace a ballast yourself. It's considered a maintenance item in the electrical regulations in most jurisdictions, but again, check to be sure. If you're going to replace it yourself, of course, make sure the power is off at the switch and the circuit breaker, and make sure it's taped, labeled, tagged, or you post a watch to make sure no one turns the power on while you're working in that fixture. All these ballasts on the labels have a wiring diagram, and it shows you which wires go where. And in North America, we have standardized color-coded wiring: blue, red, and yellow. If you want to see a video on how to do this, there's several on YouTube. Make sure it is from a qualified electrician making the video. This is a link here to one of the videos I found that was very good. Shows relamping from a magnetic ballast T12 Troffer to an electronic ballast with T8 or LED tubes, and also shows how to replace the lamp holders. The plastic lamp holders in a fixture are referred to as tombstones in the industry, and those can be replaced also. So as of now, you have 5 options for updating your fluorescent fixtures. The first option, which was done the past 20 years, you change to a T8 electronic ballast and you put in T8 fluorescent tubes. That was done starting 20 years ago. More recently, we have LED tubes, so the options have changed. Now you can put in a T8 electronic ballast and buy plug-and-play LED tubes, which are type A tubes. If you already have electronic ballasts, you just change the tubes. The third option is you can change just the tubes, not the ballast, to what are called LED universal plug-and-play type A tubes. These universal plug-and-plays will work in any fixture, magnetic or electronic ballasted fixtures. So you can just change the tubes. The downside is they're still pretty expensive, about $19 a pair, but it will give you some savings, at least 50% right off the bat. The fourth option is you can remove the ballast and use direct wire LED tubes, or type B, or ballast bypass. They all refer to the same thing, direct wire tubes. Here you bypass the ballast and you wire the tombstones directly to the 120 volt current coming in. I would recommend an electrician do this. There are some disadvantages to this. I know it's a very popular option right now. It sounds very popular. It sounds much simpler. But again, the tombstones are now at 120 volts, and we all know we've seen broken tombstones in some of our fixtures, so I would not do it for those. The other thing is different manufacturers have you wire the fixture differently. So some manufacturers, you run the black hot wire to one end of the tombstones and the white neutral wire to the other end of the tombstones. Other manufacturers have you run the black and the white wire to one end only and nothing to the other end. So if you use this option, you have to buy that same tube again and again and again, because not every tube is going to work with the fixtures after they've been rewired. Another thing to keep in mind, the tube is directional now. You have to plug the right end into the right tombstone to get it to light up. If you put it in backwards, it will not light up. Your fifth option is just change the entire fixture. This is simpler, it's quicker, but it's also the most expensive option. So you buy a new LED strip light, a wrap light, or a Troffer, which sits in the dropped ceiling grid. That's called a Troffer, steel case. If the fixture is hardwired, of course, you will probably require an electrician to do this if you are not comfortable with it. So, but fifth option is the fastest and the easiest, and frankly gives the best overall appearance once it's done. But it is the most expensive option. A new LED Troffer 2x4 is around $100 right now. An LED strip, 4 foot, is around $100. An 8-foot strip can be as high as $240, depending on the manufacturer. So take a look and decide what's going to work best for you. So just a note about Troffers. Again, these sit in the dropped ceiling grids that most church buildings have. There are two types of Troffers, LED Troffers now. There's what's called a center basket Troffer. That's the one on the left. It has a plastic lens down the middle and a beveled edge. Those, in my opinion, throw light more evenly across the space. The light is spread further away from the fixture, and it gives a more even look in the space, as you can see in the photo. The other option is what are called LED panels or glow panels or flat panels. The LEDs are in the periphery of the fixture, and they throw the light into the center, and then it glows and brings the light down. As you can see from that photo, it is a more direct source. It throws more light down than away. So you have dark spots and light spots, unless they're placed very close together. These fixtures are also pretty heavy. They can be 10 to 15 pounds for a 2x4 panel. So my preferred option is the center basket Troffer. So this is a comparison of the different wattage levels for the different arrangements of fluorescent fixtures. So the older fixtures, the original arrangement, 4 T12 tubes with 2 magnetic ballasts, used about 172 watts. Changing to an electronic ballast and putting in the T8 tubes brings that down to about 110 to 128 watts, depending on the ballast factor. Most ballasts, you want a N, or normal ballast factor, so you're in the middle of that range. If you put in an electronic ballast and 4 LED tubes, that brings that down to about 68 watts. And a new LED Troffer can be as low as 26 watts, usually 26 to 35 watts. So you can take these numbers and see which financial arrangement works out best for you. So LED bulbs, what should you buy? This is based on my experience over the last 10-11 years buying and using LED bulbs. And so these are some of the brands that I've had better success with. So EcoSmart, which is the Home Depot private label brand, I've had good luck with. Fight Electric, especially the newer Fight Enhanced bulbs, so far I've had very good luck with. And then Philips bulbs I've also had very good luck with. Generally, I avoid the Cree bulbs, which are now mostly off the shelves. Sylvania bulbs, I've had a lot of blowouts with those, failed bulbs, so I avoid those typically. And then GE bulbs seem to be hit or miss, but they're still very expensive compared to the other brands. There are off brands. You may see Satco or TCPI or something a contractor might put in. For those or any other ones you see, like on Amazon or online, check the customer reviews. And you are looking for reviews that talk about longevity. So, for instance, it's been a year, they're still working great. You don't want a review that says, I put them in 5 minutes ago and they're so much brighter now. You want longevity. For things like ballasts, fixtures, outdoor floodlights, so forth, I usually go to a web for that. So 2 websites I use for those, usually 1000bulbs.com, typically for ballasts, LED tubes in quantity. Sometimes specialty bulbs like narrow beam spotlights, I'll use them. And then beeslighting.com, like Bumblebee. Outdoor fixtures and Troffers, LED Troffers, I've purchased through Bees Lighting, and I've had good customer service from each one of those and decent pricing. So how do you choose the right LED bulb? Well, there's certain things you want to look for. People care about color, they care about brightness, and then how much wattage you're saving. So 3 things to look for: color temperature, which is listed in degrees Kelvin or K; the color rendering index or CRI, which is how accurate the color will look under that light; and then lumen output, how bright is the bulb. Did you have a 100-watt bulb? Did you have a 60-watt bulb? What's the equivalent to that? So as of this 2007, when this rule was passed, they standardized lighting information on light bulb packages. So we have nutrition facts for food. We now have lighting facts for light bulbs. So you refer to this label on the package and it will give you all this information except possibly CRI. The color label on the right side does have CRI on it, but they all don't have that. So you might have to Google that. Typically, if it's a higher CRI bulb, they will have that on the package. So color temperature, what color is the light coming out of that bulb? Again, it's in degrees Kelvin. So typically they used to say things like soft white, warm white, halogen white, very vague marketing terms. But now you can look up a number and get very specific with it. So unfortunately, you have to memorize some numbers here or write it on your hand. So if you like warm white, incandescent, yellow white, halogen, yellow white color, typically used indoors, you're looking for a range of about 2700 Kelvin, 3000 Kelvin, anything up to about 3500 Kelvin. Most often you'll see 2700 or 3000 on the packages. 4000 Kelvin is fluorescent cool white, and then 5000 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin or higher is daylight, the very bright bluish white bulbs. Typically you'll see these outside, like stadium lighting, flood lighting, things like that. Again, most people prefer warm white for indoors, so you're looking for a range around 3000 K plus or minus. So if you look at the lighting facts label over here on the right, light appearance is towards the bottom. It's got the sliding scale with the tick mark, and the tick mark is at 3000 K, so we know that is a warm white bulb. So color rendering index or CRI. That is how accurate the color looks under that light source. So sunlight is 100 CRI, perfect color rendering. So this is almost like a percentage. Fluorescent typically is 65 to 80 CRI. Standard LEDs, up until recently, have typically been in the 80 to 82 CRI range. You can now get LEDs in the higher CRI range. 90 to 93, 95, I've even seen one at 98. So again, higher CRI bulbs usually have that on the package now. So the bottom right here, we have the Fight Enhanced bulb. It says right on the package, 90 plus CRI. So again, it may not show up in the lighting facts label, but it should be marked somewhere else on the box. They're going to advertise that because they're trying to sell them. Generally, higher CRI means the bulb's a bit brighter looking. Even if it's warm white, you can get these in warm white, high CRI bulb. That's what the enhanced are. Typically, you're going to see better photography and better video. So weddings in your church, confirmations, baptisms, church fair, church dinner, whatever it might be, a higher CRI bulb means it's going to look brighter and you'll have better photography from that. Again, if the CRI is not listed on the lighting facts label or on the box, you may have to Google it. But again, the higher CRI bulbs will say it right on the package. So I know Sylvania calls it the True Wave bulb. GE, I've seen recently, calls it the Sunshine or Sunlight bulb. They're still very vague. They don't give you numbers. But Fight Enhance puts it right on there, 90 plus CRI. So these higher CRI bulbs are my go-to bulb now. I prefer them for all of my relamping work because again, it looks a bit brighter, it's still warm white, and it gives much better color rendition. So The last thing to look for, how bright is the bulb? Lumen output. So lumens measure the amount of light put out by a light source. We used to call it candle power. Unfortunately, you'll have to write down a number again or learn the numbers, but you can compare different bulbs by their lumen output. So if you like 100 watt incandescent bulbs for the light level, that's about 1700 lumens. If you like 60 watt incandescent bulbs, those are about 800 lumens. So if you look on the lighting facts label, the top line says brightness, 800 lumens. That's where it will be. So we know 800 lumens is about a 60 watt equivalent. If you look at the bottom, energy use, 14 watts. That's what the actual wattage is for that bulb. Even though they'll call it an equivalent, 60 watt equivalent, 100 watt equivalent, that's not what it's using. They look for the energy use at the bottom of the label. Tells you what you're actually burning. So a 100 watt equivalent these days typically burns around 15 to 17 watts. A 60 watt LED, typically you're burning about anywhere from 8 to 10 watts at this point. So this 14 on the label here, this 14 watts, that's probably a compact fluorescent bulb, so an older label. For fluorescent fixtures, if you are replacing ceiling fixtures and you have 4 tube ceiling fixtures now, that's about 4,000 effective lumens coming out of that fixture. So any new fixture you buy, like a strip, an LED wrap, an LED Troffer, you want at least 4,000 lumens out of that fixture. If it's an 8-foot strip, 8-foot fixture, you want around 8,000 lumens for that fixture. So again, you're going to have to remember some numbers here, but this is what you're comparing when you look at these labels. Make sure you're getting the right brightness you want. So LED bulbs are available in just about every size, every shape, every purpose you can imagine right now. The regular traditional light bulb shape is referred to as an A-shaped bulb. Typically, the number will be the dimension, so most bulbs will be A19, A20 bulbs. That is a standard sized, regular shaped light bulb. Newer bulbs now, they have color selectable bulbs. They have brightness selectable bulbs. That's always a safe bet because you can change the color if you want a different color. But they do have color selectable with a switch on the side of the bulb now. They also have high output A-shaped bulbs up to a 300 watt incandescent equivalent. So 3,000, 4,000 lumens. So very easy to put that in a fixture if you want a lot more light. Most often they will have a medium base. Another big thing, LED filament bulbs. I've heard even up till fairly recently, someone thought those were incandescent bulbs. They are not. It's a string of LED chips fused together with the yellow coating on it, which is for color correction, but it looks like an incandescent bulb, but it's called an LED filament bulb. So you still get the savings, you still get the color, and you still get dimmability, and you can get whatever base. Typically you'll find these in a chandelier, like in the photo on the right, the wall sconce. That's what those bulbs look like in warm white. You can get them in daylight if you want, but warm white looks pretty good, and you can get them up to a 100 watt equivalent now. I don't think the incandescents went up that high. I think it was 60 or 75 maximum, but now these go up to 100 watt equivalent. So these candelabra bulbs, torpedo shaped bulbs, flame tip bulbs are available all over the place, and you can get the flame tip, you can get it clear, you can get it frosted. All the options are there now. Spotlights and floodlights for ceiling cans, track lights, spotlight fixtures. You can get these up to a 250 watt, actually 325 watt equivalent now. You can vary the beam angle if you want a narrow beam, like a 15 degree, 25 degree beam for a very high spotlight shining down on a pulpit or a specific place. You can get that. Or you can get the regular can lights, usually a BR, which means it diffuses the light further away. So BR is bulbous reflector, so it's got a rounded bottom, versus R or PAR, which is more focused. That's the flat bottom spotlight bulbs, but they're all available now. And I even saw a selectable beam angle bulb not too long ago. So you want sharp, you want narrow, you want broad, you can just select that right on the bulb. They also make three-way bulbs, and they make exit sign bulbs. If you don't change your exit signs to just LED, you can replace the bulbs in an exit sign with an LED exit sign bulb. They're 1 watt each, and they go right in the fixture. So these are all available now to replace everything that has been on the market traditionally. So HID lamps, again, high intensity discharge, anything that takes about 10 minutes to come up to full brightness, usually outdoor fixtures, floodlights, parking lot lights, floodlights on the steeple, spotlights. Occasionally you might have them indoors if you have a large auditorium or big space, gymnasium. These were typically found and used there. Again, long warm-up time. Usually they use a mogul base socket, so the larger 1.5-inch base socket. Again, outdoor lighting, large spaces, high ceilings. There are LED replacement bulbs and fixtures for all these applications now. Typically the bulbs, the pictures are on the bottom there. They call these corn cob bulbs, or corn or cob bulbs. They have LEDs all the way around the bulb. So you would use that wherever you want light thrown everywhere. So like a high bay fixture, a post light along a sidewalk. These are all ballast bypass bulbs, so you have to rewire your fixture so the black and the white power go directly to the socket for these bulbs. Most often they're found in daylight, 5,000, 6,000 Kelvin. You can find them in warm white online if you look though, 3,000 Kelvin. If you have parking lot lights or floodlight where all the light needs to go in one direction, you can buy something called a paddle bulb, which is the photos on to the right of the corn cob. The LEDs are all on one side of the bulb. So they do make those for there. So if you put a corn cob bulb in one of those fixtures, you're going to waste some light bouncing around the fixture. A paddle bulb will throw all the light in one direction. So you have to search online for those. They're not as common, but they are available. And then finally, if you have high bay fixtures and you don't want to rewire the fixtures, you can buy a new fixture. So the flat disc photo there in the bottom right, these are called UFO high bay fixtures. So you just buy the new fixture. It comes with a 6-foot cord already attached, so you can put a plug on it or hardwire it. You hang it off a hook or chain and just replace the whole fixture. You can get these in warm white if you look. Typically they'll come in the daylight again, but much better savings. And these fixtures, typically you can get them from $80 to about $120. So not too expensive, but they replace the entire fixture. So get rid of all that excess wattage. Okay, so motion sensor switches have been out for quite a while now. There are studies that show that just using motion sensors, even if you don't touch your regular lights or change anything, you can still save 20 to 30% on your electric bill just by going with motion sensors. Typically in a lighting upgrade, if the state program does it for you, they will put these in, because in some places it is now code. I know California, it's now in the residential building code. It's in most commercial building codes already, because they do save money. The biggest problem with these is placement. So if you replace a switch with a motion sensor switch, make sure everyone is in direct line of sight to that switch, the little window on the switch there. The biggest problem with these historically has been bathrooms. It's on the wall. People go into the stall. If they're in the stall for too long, the lights will turn off. So most modern applications, an electrician will put a ceiling sensor in so that it sees the whole room. There's another version of these called occupancy sensors. So this uses the presence, the light sensor, but it also uses sound as well. So almost like a Doppler effect. It shoots out a sound wave. Even if you're not moving, it will still detect that someone is there and not turn the lights off. So an occupancy sensor may be better for certain applications. There's also timers, electronic timers, there's the rotary timers. All of these should still work with LEDs. The nice thing now though is, especially for older churches, you may not have the neutral wire or the white wire in all of these switch boxes in the wall. These new ones do not require a neutral. Make sure it says that on the package before you buy it, but they don't always require the white neutral wire. So you can replace it in kind and not have to worry about that. So special note about dimmer switches. LEDs are designed to work with pulse dimmers, not typically with the traditional resistive rheostat dimmers where it's a rotary button, you snap it on, turn it all the way up, and then you can adjust the brightness of the bulbs that way. So the picture down on the left there, that's the old rheostat. Sometimes LEDs will work, sometimes they will not. Several times I've relamped a whole space and everything worked great until you put the last bulb in, and then everything starts strobing, flashing, going haywire. And the problem's not the bulbs, the problem is the rheostat. So we've had to change to an electronic slide switch. So these work by pulse now, and the bulbs respond to pulse. So it pulses the circuit more or it pulses the circuit less. So just be aware, if you're having issues once you change your bulbs, you probably have to replace your dimmers as well. If you don't need the dimmer, take it out and just put a regular switch in. That's another easy way to get around this. Always make sure that the slide dimmer, electronic dimmer, is LED compatible, which 99% of them are, but check anyway. The green label on the bottom right there, that's from a dimmer package. So it says right on there, LED up to 150 watts. So just double check before you purchase. So these are some of the state energy efficiency programs I'm familiar with. In Connecticut, there's EnergizeCT.com. Massachusetts has MassSave.com. Rhode Island, it's through the utility companies in the state, National Grid and the municipals, but it's controlled through the state program. So that's the link to the state program on the state government webpage. In New York, your local utility administers the program. If it's a large commercial project like industrial property, stadium, something really big, NYSERDA will get involved and do the larger projects, but it's the same type incentive program. So these state programs, typically what happens is you call them up. For a church, you would ask about the small business program, small business audit, and they will come out, they will do an energy audit of the building for free. They write up the report, they pick, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z, here's what the projected savings are. They do have access to your electric bills, so they can give you a real world savings amount on the proposal. So you can choose to accept that and move forward, or you can reject it, no cost to you. If you move forward, typically they will use pre-screened contractors to do the work who know what they're doing. The fixtures and bulbs will be pre-discounted. And in addition to that, based on how good the savings is, the state will take off a certain percent of the project cost right at the get-go. So 50%, 60%, in some cases I've seen 70% taken right off the project bill. So if it's a $16,000 project, they take 70% off of that. You're left with, $3,000 or $4,000. So you can pay that in a lump sum if you want, or in these programs you can spread that out on your electric bill interest-free up to 48 months. So 9 times out of 10, it's going to be cheaper than doing nothing, and you don't have to lift a finger. So if you're in one of these states, anywhere in the Northeast, West Coast, there's state programs, please consult that first, because it may be the easiest thing you've ever done. So this is just a discussion photo. This is my home church in Connecticut after we relamped it. So you can see the torch lights on the columns are all the Fight Enhance high CRI bulbs in warm white, 100 watt equivalents, so 17 watts. Much brighter, the color is much crisper. The light over the choir loft way up on the ceiling there. Had to get to that through the attic, Indiana Jones style. That was a 400 watt metal halide high bay fixture above the ceiling with the ballast 450 watts. So we replaced that with a 150 watt UFO fixture, LED, in warm white, and cut the wattage 75%, 80% right off the bat. So very, very nice savings from that. Also did the floodlights on either side, or the spotlights on either side of the choir loft, which are not on in this photo, but you brightened it up quite a bit and cut the energy use considerably. So just demonstration of what can be achieved. So this is another church that I did in Connecticut. Like a lot of old colonial sanctuaries in New England, they have a large central chandelier lighting up most of the sanctuary. So this church, they had 38 bulbs in that chandelier. They were 40 watt incandescent bulbs. So we changed that to the current equivalent. I found LED filament bulbs by Fight, the enhanced version, so the high CRI bulbs, filament bulbs, warm white, 40 watt equivalent is now 3.3 watts. So we changed all 38 bulbs and we got that fixture wattage down from 1520 watts down to 125 watts. So better than a 90% wattage reduction, and made it brighter, and miraculously they still worked with the old resistive dimmers, though those are being changed out. But anyway, how are you not doing this? The savings are fantastic. So this wraps up my presentation. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions or particular situations you would like me to look at, give you some advice on, feel free to leave a comment below, or you can email me at this email address on the screen. So thank you for attending, and I hope you found it worthwhile.